Join Holly Radio Show. Happy to have you around. Thank you for allowing us to be part of your day just for a little bit. Find out all those sponsors and retain those coupon codes that you've heard and hear throughout the program at our parent website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, underneath the Money tab at the top of the page. Well, Holly, we hear a lot growing up, if you're in the gardening community, companion. We got to plant companion.
So companion planting, so I'll give you the definition from a university website, is the practice of growing certain plants together or near proximity for a mutual benefit, such as enhancing nutrients, pollination, and crop yield. Some successful companion planting principles have been passed down through generations, and some have been scientifically studied and proven. However, the majority of them lack any scientific proof that they work.
Okay.
So that's the answer.
And we've seen this because you can type in companion planting chart online. You get 14 charts and you get 17 different results of, this with this or this not with that. And that hates this and this love. It's all over the place. And passed down, and in some realms, this is a fancy one and it looks good, maybe we'll get some clicks type of thing.
Right. So there is, companion planting can be helpful.
Companion planting is different than polyculture.
Right. So anyway, I'm going to just talk about this.
Yeah.
Companion planting can be helpful to maximize garden space, maybe improve soil health, etc. But again, it's not backed by scientific data. However, planting early season crops and late season crops in the same bed can help tame weeds by providing cover for the soil throughout the growing season. So that is, I wouldn't even call that companion planting. I would call that intercropping. But
intercropping, the process of growing a fast crop in amongst a slower growing crop and having two different crops in the same general area of your garden at the same time.
Right. And then there's also something like using flowers or herbs to help deter or attract harmful or beneficial insects, so such as planting a variety of plants with different heights, leaf shapes. Those can confuse insects.
Herbs around squash, zucchini to defer or mess up the scent glands or the picker-uppers for the squash vine borer.
So companion planting like that makes sense and it's scientific.
But it's not really companion planting, is it?
Yes, it is.
Is it?
Yes, that's what it is. It's not something where
we've gotten messed up with that term.
Right. It's not something where it's like, if you plant basil next to your tomatoes,
it'll make it sweeter.
It'll make it sweeter.
Yeah.
That's not proven.
That's wrong.
It's not companion planting. However, I think some people do confuse companion planting with intercropping or polyculture gardening. And intercropping and polyculture gardening are very similar. Basically, you are making the best use of your garden beds.
So would a Three Sisters garden, would that be a form of companion planting?
It would be more of an intercropping.
Okay.
Or a polyculture. It's basically a plant is helping another plant, but not because of its benefits, but because of something like the Three Sisters, which is a good example, because you are growing the squash as a ground cover. The beans can grow up the corn stalk.
As the pole.
Yeah, as the pole. So it's like, that's a sort of polyculture. And then intercropping, we can give some examples of this. But so that's kind of the difference. So polyculture is like, these plants are helping each other, but they're not helping each other scientifically. They're helping each other physically, basically.
But whenever you see the term, you read online, you read some of these blogs, if you plant this next to this, it has the potential of detouring or shying away or hiding or preventing certain bugs from eating X plant.
I think that.
But whenever you hear it say, if you plant this next to this, it will make this plant sweeter or this plant grow better. In that realm, that's not right.
Right. And I think at times companion planting has become a blanket term for other things, but then it's still associated with the non-scientific data. So, for example, it's like when people say Kleenex versus tissue.
Kleenex is a copyright brand, and tissue is the actual item.
Or, I don't know.
Jet ski is another one.
Jet ski.
Kawasaki owns that name, but it's an industry. Everybody says, "Oh, it's a jet ski." It's a personal watercraft, is what it is. Something of that realm in the legal terms.
Yeah. So it's like that, where there's not it's companion planting has become branded, and it's also it's
marketing
tool, but it's not what everybody thinks it is. So
if it's one of these things like, this is when it's kind of the thing whenever you buy seeds. Oh, a rare multicolor fill in the blank, 20 seeds left. It's just as fake can be, because if the big seed companies don't have it, it doesn't exist. Not some person online in fill-in-the-blank country happens to have 20 of these seeds and selling them on Amazon for $4 for 20 seeds. Doesn't exist. It's called a money grab. It's called marketing. If it's too good to be true, we have the technology now. The internet's now on computers, and you can look up, does this make sense? Is this? And you're going to find things that agree with you, because there's multiple blogs where somebody has written a blog and then 400 other people have copied basically almost word for word what that blog is in order to get clicks on their side. You got to dig through and find out, University Extension, reputable person. Where does it at? And usually those don't get the clicks or the publicity because they're smothered out by everybody else that's saying, oh, no, that's wrong. You can do that. This will be beneficial. And it's not true. Right.
Does it ever stop? So some more examples of, I'm going to rebrand it and call it helpful gardening. Helpful gardening. So like
HG.
Would be like polyculture, the intercropping, etc.
Now, is polyculture only when two plants are involved, or can there be multiple plants, and that's just kind of a general term for when multiple plants help each other? Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, there's like radishes. So like you can kind of think of like maybe taller plants or longer growing plants, and then smaller or shorter growing plants. You can kind of think of it.
But they have to be fast and slow.
They don't have to be. But it might be smart to
in the instance of garlic and radishes take 28 days, 32 days. Garlic can take, if you plant your radishes in the spring, garlic can take another 3 months before it's ready to harvest, and then starts to create a canopy that shades over where those radishes once was growing, but because of their quick turnaround, they're out of the ground.
Right. So we have radishes amongst garlic, as Joey had mentioned, and so the thought there is the 28 days. And then we talked about Three Sisters, which is very helpful. And there's a lot of different variations on Three Sisters, so you could maybe find one that is fun for you. Lettuce with the tomatoes. So you would plant your lettuce first, but then you would put your tomatoes in while the lettuce is still growing.
While you're harvesting the lettuce, because lettuce is a cool weather crop, and you're typically putting your tomatoes in when the weather has broken, no longer frost. So it's kind of at the end, but you're still maximizing the space for both items. Within a few weeks, your lettuce is going to go to seed, or you're going to pull it up anyway, but you're accessing all the areas that you have available.
Right. And then also, and I think that's where the polyculture part comes in instead of just intercropping, because you're coming back with something else to fill in that space.
Similar to the square foot gardening.
Right. Just like if you were to take your garlic out and plant something behind it, maybe
We'll do potatoes.
Potatoes, yeah.
Or real late, quick growing tomatoes.
Right. So that's another concept there, another idea. Radishes with spinach is another one.
Because of the leaf miners, the concept is the leaf miners, which eats the leaves, will attack the radish leaves and leave your spinach crisp and untouched, so it can be edible and you can eat it.
Right. So
Swiss chard is another one that the leaf miners will go after, so you can kind of work around that as well with a trap plant is what they call it.
Yes. And yeah, so those are some examples there. And I think ultimately a lot of people just want to save space and grow things that will grow together well and that they will have success. So I think another one that people overlook is that they don't realize is very helpful is trellising items and making sure they're off the ground, especially if you don't have a lot of space.
Cucumbers, for example. A cucumber plant, if let sprawled, which that's what we did on the farm, we didn't trellis anything but peas, a cucumber plant can take 20 to 30 square feet. You put that vertically, and you can maximize that on a vertical aspect. You can still, let's say, instead of 20 or 30 feet, you're utilizing 8 to 12 feet. You've got a lot more places in the ground that you can plant, and it's easier to harvest. You're not missing one and it turns into a giant football and turns yellow and the plant shuts down because the seed production is complete. Also, it's easier for pollinators to get a hold of those flowers. Easier to see diseases because it's elevated. You can look up instead of laying down. Nobody lays down in the garden and goes, well, okay, what's underneath that leaf? It doesn't happen.
I think some people do.
I don't know. Good for them. But yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah. So if you're looking to save space and you're like, oh, this seems smart, you can consider other things like trellising. You can consider, and other things you can trellis besides peas and cucumbers are.
Well, pole beans you have to.
Yeah.
You can do some small squashes.
Yeah.
Acorn squash, small watermelons. I've seen small watermelons being trellised. People trellis zucchini. That is a thing. You can do that. So there is some benefits to that. Tomatoes technically are trellised.
Right. Or you can purchase small space plants.
Yep.
Like the Tiny Tim and Tiny Tom,
yeah. Tomatoes and peas.
Right. And then also, like the bush beans. If you don't want to trellis, you could grow bush beans. So there are options to save space and to also make use of the best space of your garden. And then even if you already do all these things, you can add, different containers, get creative with that. There's a lot of options.
And the problem with some of us northern gardeners is it's to a point in the season where it's just broke and there's no more frost because it was 14 degrees yesterday. Tomorrow, we're all done with cold weather, so it's time to dump everything in the garden all at once. There is no spring crop, and it's spring, summer all together. So that is a challenge for some of the northern gardeners as well.
Right. Yeah. So you want to just think about these things and be smart. And also, if it seems too good to be true on the internet, it probably is.
Soon it will be warming up, Holly. We are almost there. And you will want to protect your yard from those beetles and grubs.
Yeah, with spring, is here, and people will be reminding you about those Japanese beetles. I actually just was at a work thing, and my coworker who also gardens said something to me about how she's not looking forward to the pests of the garden. And that's a lot of talk, about the Japanese beetles.
Well, you can get Grub Gone. It can be applied to your turf, garden, or around your ornamentals to control and lessen the impact those beetles have on your yard this summer. Easy to apply, use with a commercial spreader, irrigate right into the soil. It is specifically designed to target grub and beetle invaders without harming those beneficial insects such as bees, butterflies, and ladybugs.
And it is the only non-chemical that works. You can find out more at phyllumbioproducts.com. That's PHYLLOM bioproducts.com.